This story is a prologue to a modern princess. When Laura and I had our marriage arrangement meeting with our parents, they specifically mentioned her health issues and said that it didn't matter who she married. They just needed someone to take care of her. I was very reluctant to the union. I didn't want to have to take care of someone constantly. From that first conversation alone, I could tell they just wanted her to be looked after. I flew abroad for 2 years, using my family business as an excuse to avoid her. I only flew back because of my mother's worsening condition. For 2 years Laura took care of my mother without any complaints. In my mother's last moments, I could tell that they had gotten really close. After my mother passed away, despite having a long list of food allergies, Laura did her best to try and cook for me. When I got home, food was already on the table. Despite not being able to eat seafood, she still had the servants cook it from time to time. Her family didn't want her to work because of her condition and wanted her to be a housewife. I knew that Laura also felt ashamed of her physical condition. So I let her work as a low-level employee in another company, just to lessen her guilt. Then one day she went to a company retreat and ate something new that she had no idea she was allergic to. She was fine, but the anaphylaxis was strong enough that it cost her to have a miscarriage. She also didn't know that she was pregnant back then. She was just a few weeks in. Despite knowing her reasons for wanting to work, I had to ask her to stop working. In order to compensate, I gave her a black credit card with no spending limit and gave her a personal driver. I didn't know that she took it as my compensation for not being there when she lost the child. She thought I felt guilty that I was with Celine when she called. Speaking of, I told that woman countless times that there wasn't anything between us. Yet she had the audacity to tell Laura to divorce me. I want to yell at Laura's face for obeying her. I want to ask her if she really thought that I had no feelings for her. I thought I did my best these past 3 years. I took care of the business, and I took care of Laura, but it seems my actions and intentions weren't coming across the way I intended to her. I want to ask Laura a lot of questions, but even she can't answer it right now. Chapter 4 Morgan. I want to know what she thought of our relationship all these years. In her eyes, I was just a cool and uncaring husband. These past 5 years have been really stressful for me. I had revived my family's company that was on the verge of collapse, my mother died, and I can't take my eyes off my wife even for a second. All of the sudden Laura's phone ding with a message. It was her parents. Her mother gave her a list of all the food she's allergic to, and reminding her to always carry her EpiPen. How could she be resentful of them? I turned around and saw Laura. "I'm sorry, did I woke you?" I lead her to seat at the barstool counter. When my phone rang, I glanced at Laura and reluctantly said that I'll be there. "That's the office, I got to go. Get dressed, my secretary will accompany you to the grocery, all right?" Laura and I got in the car. They dropped me off at the office. I told my secretary, "Philip, don't let her eat any free samples. Go to the pharmacy first and stock up on her EpiPens. Make sure she has 1 or 2 in her bag before you drop her at the villa, right?" "Yes, sir." Seating in the car, I feel like a child who has to be escorted by her nanny. "Does Morgan hate me?" "Of course not, madam." I asked him what caused my first miscarriage in the hospital. He said it was due to stress. But when I got home, I learned that it was also because of my allergies. "You didn't know that it contained an allergen. Why does Morgan hate David so much?" "David is the boss's half-brother from his father's mistress." "What?" I paused in surprise before asking. "Does Morgan have a relationship with a girl named Celine?" "No, Well, not since they called off their engagement," he said. "David said that I caught Morgan having an affair with Celine." He choked on his drink and said, "That son of a. First off, the boss isn't having an affair with Celine. Second, you can't believe anything that comes out of David's mouth. He had always had an act of stealing from the boss. Like business deals." He nodded and said, "Among other things." "Like?" I asked curiously. "Like Celine." He said. "So David took Celine from Morgan?" This was getting interesting. "Yes. When their father died, he left everything to the boss. David couldn't do anything because his mother died when he was young. So your mother-in-law had persuaded him to cut off David. However, he already made a name for himself in a business world. While the boss was forced to study overseas to take over the family business. By the time the boss came back, David already took most of the company's most important clients. So the boss had to start from ground up. The late madam wanted to strengthen the company by marrying Morgan to Celine. However, Celine, seeing a failing business, didn't want to go through with the marriage arrangement. She ended up in bed with David. He then used her connections to further block the boss's prospects. However, the boss's mother, ever the cunning woman, decided that marrying her son to a family with good connections is more important than money. And that's where I came in. Look, madam. I know that it might seem like the boss has been cold to you for the past few years, but believe me when I say that he's doing his best to take care of you. Then how do you explain his pictures with Celine? Miss Celine is the daughter of one of the city's most prominent businessmen. It will be hard to avoid her seeing us. They ran in the same circles. I feel so guilty. He seems to care about me a lot. Did I really resent him for being distant when I was writing down my thoughts in the diary? Or is it that I just didn't want to admit the truth to myself? That I am a burden to him? I can't blame him if he wants to be with Celine. Someone he doesn't constantly need to look after. Unlike me, who needs to be monitored daily. I can't remember. I ended up going back to Morgan's house, hoping that my memories would come back, but none came. When I felt depressed, Morgan made love to me. A few days later he took me to an event held by his company. Everyone was made well aware of my condition beforehand. So they had to introduce themselves to me. They said that Morgan made sure that the caterer for the night gathering didn't have anything that I was allergic to, so I could rest easy. An employee came up to me and said, "It's good that you two didn't go through with the divorce, madam. The boss was really depressed when you said that you want to divorce him." Hello, Laura. And you are? Don't worry, we never met in person. I'm Celine. And you are? I pretended not to know. The shameless woman, who wanted to steal my husband. Don't try to play me, I know you know about my relationship with Morgan. You're saying, you're my husband's mistress? Hearing that word, Celine snapped. She whispered to me, "He will leave sooner or later with you, having already had 2 miscarriages. Why not save us all the trouble, take the initiative and divorce him?" The lawyer said that I already did, but Morgan refused to respond. Just then I saw Morgan towering over Celine with an angry expression. He spoke with her for a while and then he dragged me out of the building into his car. "Don't listen to her. I would speak to, and I will cut her off our lives, all right. Don't worry, Philip told me what happened between you, David and Celine," I said. He then slammed the brakes and stared at me angrily. He stayed silent, turned into the road and kept on driving. We went outside the city limit and into a cliffside mansion in the middle of the night. He dragged me out the car and into the house, where he forced himself on me. He threw me to a bed in one of the rooms, got on top of me and said, "You're on my side now?" he asked. "Don't know. I don't know who's telling the truth. I'm your husband. Absent husband," I said as I turned my head to the wall. He then said, "We are not getting a divorce. You understand, Laura?" He then kissed me and made love to me throughout the night, until I had trouble walking in the morning. Chapter 5: The Other Side. I woke up and smiled as I saw my wife sleeping beside me. I might have been too rough with her last night. When Laura woke up, I cooked her breakfast. We sat at the breakfast table overlooking the ocean. My phone rang. "It's Philip, I got to take this," I said, as I walked away from the table. "How is she?" he asked. I said to him, "You have no right to meddle in my affairs. David told her that you were having an affair with Celine. That son of a bitch. You could have avoided this. Have you just sat her down from the beginning, instead of avoiding it?" "Shut up." I sat as I put down the phone. After the misunderstanding was clarified, I brutally went for David's company. I was eager to know how long Laura's amnesia will last, so I went with her to her checkup. "Doctor, is there anything you can do to help her gain some of her memory back?" "You can't rush these things, Mr. Stone. The MRI results were inconclusive. Let's not forget that on top of the oxygen deprivation, she also hit her head when the car tumbled over. Moreover, Mrs. Stone, have you not been eating lately? No, I haven't had an appetite and I'm always dizzy. Laura said. We're going to need a urine sample and a blood test, run some test. You can come back next week for the results. I told Philip to make a spot for Laura's appointment on my calendar for the next week. I went with her to get the results. The doctor asked, "You got your appetite back?" Like this story, comment, and subscribe.